welcome everybody. Now that everybody's pumped and excited to learn after those tunes, I gotta take it down a notch with some housekeeping information. I'm glad everybody can make it on today, take some time to invest in yourselves and the industry. My name is Jonah Hobson. I'm the marketing manager here at ITI. I'm really excited about today's webinar. If you've been a part of these before, today's going to be a little bit different. Usually our president, Mike, he breaks down a really industry-specific topic from a technical standpoint. And today's webinar is coming from and geared toward a little bit different point of view. Today we're going to help out training managers, training coordinators, safety professionals, basically everybody tasked with the decision to make decisions when it comes to training their employees. So we're excited to have Zack Parnell, Vice President of ITI, as your host this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. And we're very happy to have a special guest on the line as well, Sirrine from Boeing. Gordon handles a number of training decisions for Boeing, so he knows the ins and outs of the selection process. Alrighty. Again, if you've been on a webinar with us before, we just want to tell you a little bit about who we are. ITI basically is a training company, training, education, consulting, anything that really is going to better the industry. ITI wants to have a hand in that. We currently have a presence in the United States, Canada, and Brazil, with trainers based in all 3 countries. And we have the capability to work in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe as well. Okay, as you can see on the slide here, ITI's expertise in cranes and rigging really applies to a number of industries. And by the looks of the attendee list, we have a pretty good cross-section of those industries represented on the line today. We're really proud of this slide. We're happy to work with some of the best companies in the world. Again, I saw a couple of people on the line today who are represented by these pictures, and of course, Gordon as well. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Zack here in a minute. As I mentioned before, Zack's the Vice President of ITI, and he's really been around cranes and rigging his entire life, including the last 5 years professionally. If you joined us on previous webinars, you'll recognize his voice. He's introduced Mike a number of times, as well as other guest hosts. He fields questions that come in on past webinars and basically just ran the show. So I want to mention a couple housekeeping items before we get going here. If you have any questions that come up at any time, make sure to enter them into the question pane at the bottom of your screen. I'll be gathering those questions, and I'll make sure Zack or Gordon get a crack at them during the question and answer portion of the webinar. Just so everyone knows, this recording will be available online, most likely 24 hours after it's completed, as well as all past showcase webinars. And with that, Zack, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jonah. This is an odd place for me to be in, everybody. Obviously, probably, if you've been on before, like Jonah said, I've been able to co-host or present or introduce Mike, but yeah, this month I get to present, so I'm really excited to have Gordon on the line. He's traveling right now, and he's made his schedule available to be on this call with us. So Gordon is part of the Learning, Training, and Development group at Boeing. He's based here in Washington State with us as well. So he's going to be chiming in. We have a bunch of poll questions actually today for you because the topic, as you all know, it's 9 questions that you must ask when selecting a crane and rigging training provider. Boeing and Gordon, for instance, do this on a grand scale, daily basis. These questions, I passed along several of them to him. I mean, they're not only questions that you might ask your vendor, for instance, but a lot of them are actually questions that you want to ask yourselves. Okay, and that's pretty much the first one we're going to get into is about that. And if you could, Jonah's he's monitoring the Q&A. So everyone, if you have any audio problems, please let him know. Otherwise, it'd be great to hear back from a couple people on the Q&A that the audio sounds good. So besides that, let's jump into it. Like I said, the first question we want to encourage everyone to ask is, and you might already know this, is how much does training really cost your organization? And just so you know, semantically, a lot of the talk will be about well, in the first person will be asking as if you're speaking, but this isn't really a trick question. What we're talking about here is what does it really take, besides the fees you might pay a training company like ITI, what does it cost you and your company to send away people for a course? You know, they're going to be off the job, they're not going to be producing, you're going to be paying them essentially not to produce, and it's basically a investment in future production and efficiency. So with that being said, let's jump into a quick poll question. The first one, really what it is imagine that you are organizing a training for a large group of people in your company, which you probably all do every day. What would you estimate as the average hourly pay per employee? Okay, so I'm going to launch this poll. And I might actually, Gordon and I had a discussion about this prior to, and if he's able to chime in here as we're talking, I'd like to hear his feedback. But it's going to offer up a few different hourly rates. We're going to be building basically a model for you throughout this presentation that you'll be able to input later on a document. But again, you go ahead and give your feedback in there. It's asking what would you say is an average hourly rate for the group of people that you would oversee to pay for training for, okay? So Gordon, if you have any feedback, if you'd like to jump in on these next three, feel free, but we'll, I know he's muted right now, folks, so I just want to make sure you're aware, but we got about 53% of the votes in. I'll leave it open a little bit longer. And just so you see down here at the bottom, we're going to call this the lost wages factor. It's costs that you can't recoup, obviously. You've sent people to an ITI training center, for instance, and you're paying them wages while they're away, okay? So let's close the results here, and I want to share them on the screen. It looks like we have about pretty good cross-section, 30%. That's a really interesting number. We had about 3/4 of everyone voted, but between $30 and $60 an hour. So again, we're going to call that the lost wages factor. And moving on really quickly, now this might be a little more difficult to calculate, but when you're looking at the full cost, what would be your lost production factor? So this is, to equate this, you're going to have to evaluate what the output is per employee that you're putting through that training, okay? And I believe sorry, technology issues here. I'm going to launch that poll for the lost production. We have different options to choose from, like $50 an hour to $250 an hour. So what you're really trying to evaluate, if it's several millwrights, for instance, Boeing might be pulling off of a shift to do overhead crane inspection course, overhead crane operation course, what is their production output per hour, okay? So I have a lot of results coming in here, and let's see, you're actually going to want to make sure you write down these two numbers, by the way, as we get further along in this presentation. So all right, we have about 3/4 again voted. I'm going to close the results just so we can keep moving along, and I'll share them with everybody. It looks like good portion of people, it's pretty good bell curve there, between $100 and $200 an hour, okay? So again, like what we're gonna call this the loss production factor, and we have a little equation we'd like you to keep in your back pocket for future reference, but that's really your total cost of training. This is your internal training costs, okay? So it's YAB plus ZAB. It's not trademark. You guys can copyright it if you want, but it's the loss production factor on the left side there, and you multiply it by the number of hours one employee is away from producing, and then multiply it again by the number of employees that are going to be away from producing in the training course, okay? Then likewise, you have the lost wages factor on the other side of the equation. It's that number between 100 and 250. I'm sorry, between 30 and 50 or whatever your lost wages was, and you multiply that by one employee away from producing times number of employees in the training course. Okay, so let's do a quick poll question on an example here. We're going to give you. Let's imagine it's a 2-day course, and this will just help round out this example. If you're scheduling training for a 2-day course for which is 16 hours for 12 of your employees, if you just plug in your Y and Z into that. So if you got a calculator, you got an iPhone nearby, can you plug in your lost wages, times it by 16 and 12, okay? And then I really wish I had Mike's tablet here so I can annotate, but and then you add it to your lost production, which times that by 16 times 12, okay? So as you're coming up with those numbers, I'm going to put the poll up again. So again, we have your output should be anywhere between 15,000 to 75,000 for that training event, okay? So go ahead and select whichever output is most applicable to you. Again, you're just multiplying your lost wages factor by 16 by 12. Could have made it simpler to say you're multiplying it by whatever that factor is, and then you're adding it to the lost production factor. Okay. Gordon, are you there? You might still be on mute, Gordon, if you're speaking. But everyone, looks like we got a third of the votes in. If you have more time, I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds to try and calculate that out just so we can keep moving along. But
yeah.
And I might give a little bit of history. Oh, go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, I will talk about technically challenged. One of the things, you know, as you look at the amount of money that you've just talked about, one of the key things to remember when you're looking at training is what is it really going to cost if you don't have it and something happens, whether it be a serious injury or potentially a fatality. The loss of life, because we don't have somebody trained on a specific subject, is something that we might get fined or something like that. But the cost of losing an individual is not a good thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
investing into your employees' training is one of the best investments that a company can make.
No, great feedback, Gordon. That's a good point. It's a lot of times we actually do show these numbers. We've been called crazy before by, you know, explaining to people that, I mean, a lot of you I'm sure have heard about this and understand how this works, understand opportunity costs, obviously, of your employees. But when we show this to folks that don't know, they're kind of shocked by the cost investment. And this is the internal costs, but what Gordon's talking about is totally true, and I'm sure you've all experienced it. A fine for motion or an accident or even a lawsuit can cause, we probably conduct about 10 accident investigations a year, and all of them are well above $1 million usually in fines and fees and all that stuff. So to think that there's a $30,000 opportunity cost investment, maybe a $5,000, $10,000 external investment, whatever it is pretty minimal compared to $1 million plus. So thanks for that feedback, Gordon. And I'm glad you were there, Gordon. I was beginning to think wonder if our participants were wondering if you did exist or not. But thank you for chiming in. He'll be back, folks. So what this really is about is our internal costs, like I said. So what I want to show you and just wrap it all together is with our external costs. So we're looking at that same training program here for a 2-day program for 12 people. We have lost production plus lost wages is our YAB and ZAB. And then the external costs are obviously the training fees. You know, the quote you get from a training company, and it could be ITI, it could be regarding safety training, it could be regarding wind technician training if you're employing wind techs. You know, whatever the training is, there's internal costs and external costs, okay? So keep in mind that what they were showing here is that there's a total of like about 38,000 in this example on average, okay? So with that, you break it down, 84% of the overall cost is actually in lost production, lost wages. The training fee there in red is $3,500, let's say. It represents 9% of the overall cost, okay? What I'd like to do is show you the same example as we conclude this. And I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but I'm circling half rate. So what we've done now is we've taken the same example and we have put in another training provider that is charging half the rate of the previous provider. Okay, so if you remember, it was $3,500 for training. This time it's $1,750. So just think about that. You got a quote for $3,500. You got a quote for $1,750. You know, multiply that by 10. You get a quote for $35,000 and a quote for $17,500. For, let's say, for a lot bigger training event or multiple events. The cost difference. I mean, the training fee's gone down to 5% from 9%, but the conclusion in our heads should be that the overall cost change is less than 4.6%. Okay, I'm really trying to emphasize that, and I really hope that I would, you know, in a conference room of some sort, I could see a lot of nodding heads. But the point is, internal costs represent upwards of 80 to 90% of the overall fees. External costs typically represent 10 to 25%. So I like to bring Gordon in here again. I think he had a good point on what it costs if you don't do it. But when you think about the internal costs versus external, it's like, wow, this is a heck of an investment. We better have a good external supplier and not someone that's willing to charge half the rate. And not that there's not a price floor. There is price floors for everything, but their quality typically comes right alongside of that. So.
Yeah, Zack, and if I may, you know, at Boeing we have 140,000 employees. So obviously we spend a lot of money on our training, and we use cranes to move multiple different components on a daily basis. And if we don't have quality training, then we turn right around and end up having incident reports potentially on. We could have incident reports on a daily basis if we don't have our employees trained. So training is an investment, and we have to make sure that we get the best bang for our buck. I'm very happy with the training that we're getting from ITI and the support that we get. And over the last 25 years, I've had a lot of different companies that I've tapped for training, and you know, I'm very pleased with the training and professional instructors, etc., that we're getting from ITI.
Well, thank you, Gordon, very much. Appreciate that. I didn't pay him to say that to anybody, so just so you're all aware. But I do appreciate that, Gordon. It's very kind of you. That's really what we're. Obviously, everyone, we educate a lot of our customers and prospects all the time in this sort of decision making, and that's why we're doing this. But I do appreciate the kind words. So the next 8 questions, everyone, will probably be going a lot quicker with a lot more poll questions, just so you're aware. But this is one thing that Gordon and I chatted about as well: competency over compliance. So what I want to do before we go to the poll question is ask yourselves, is your organization more concerned sometimes with building the skills and competency of your people, or just checking off a box? I probably shouldn't have put checking off a box in quotes. That certainly doesn't, it's not a derogatory term, but it has a bad connotation to it. It's, we're not really, compliance training is inevitable. It's needed. You need a H2S Alive cert if you're going on some plants. You need confined space, hazmat, OSHA 10, you name it. So the point is, though, in some aspects of training, competency and skills building is really what you're looking for, probably, not compliance. And what I'd like to do, I want to ask you, and Gordon had great feedback on this while I launched this poll question, but what percentage would you say of your employee training do you feel is compliance-based versus competency-based. And Gordon, do you want to share on that?
Yeah, well, I think that about up to 60% of our training is compliance. The other part of it, the competency, if you build a really good competency base, then the compliance is going to be easier and potentially take less time. So
yeah,
whether you're so that's enough said.
No, excellent point. There's also, I mean, and a lot of too what we're getting at, we have a lot of decision makers we work with too, Gordon, that they're getting compliant. They're just told, hey, you need to get your guys through these 10 courses, and 9 of them are just to get a card in their pocket, you know. But the 10th one is they're moving, 500-ton transformers around, and hey, that training course is probably more about competency. There are certifications out there in our world, but I'm going to close this poll result, everybody, and share it with you. But what we really try and emphasize is if you're looking for a skills-building training provider, that's kind of what ITI is. We certainly can provide mobile crane operator certification training. We can get your guy trained up and schooled up to pass the test. He will learn a lot while he's there, but there are also providers out there, just so you're all aware, that they will make money by divvying out cards. Okay, and I'm not bashing anybody. I'm just saying that's the nature of the training world. Some people are just selling tickets, if you will, and some people are really trying to build skills. So it's an interesting dichotomy there. And I think the last slide speaks to that a little bit. If you look at Joe's training record here, you're kind of like, yeah, Joe we got him the certification, we got him the training course. He's got the 3-year national cert for the operator. But the question is, does Joe, does he have the life-saving skills when he's operating the crane? Can he do everything that you want him to do? Is he efficient? Has he had enough seat time and skills building time to become efficient in production? So those are things you don't really get with a card, right? You need expert training to achieve that, and a lot of seat time in that practice. Okay. So the point is, regarding the rigging and lifting, it's more of a vital to have skills building type training in most cases. Okay. Question 3. This is an interesting one for Gordon as well. You guys, Boeing is a large operation. I know we've done training across the continent for Boeing, and we do this for a lot of large customers. A lot of the Fortune 500 customers we serve, they have requirements internationally and across hemispheres, right? So the question is, when you're making training decisions, does my organization require local, national, continental, or worldwide support from a vendor? It's important to know, but before I get into the reasons why, let me launch another poll question for everybody. And the question is, when you consider making employee training decisions, how broad of an effect does your decision really play? Okay, and I think it's important to know, and before I bring Gordon in on this, because you might, if you're just making a local decision, well, hey, a local provider is probably one of the best ideas, as long as their quality is great, because the travel costs will be low. They're on call pretty much. If you're making provincial or statewide or national and global decisions, then you probably want to find a provider that can scale with you, right? Scale with your company and provide training in all those places, as well as the systems behind it and the people behind it. Okay, Gordon, did you have anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, and you're right, Zach. When I make that training decision, and let's use a mobile crane operator as an example. I look at across the enterprise, across the continental United States and make a decision. Okay, what states require more stringent requirements, etc. But I try to make sure that all of our training, because our employees can transfer all over the United States. So if I'm going to train somebody in Maine, as an example, or in Florida, I want to make sure that the training that they get is consistent, meets all of my objectives, and they can go any place and operate, providing there isn't some other more stringent state requirement. So having a consistent delivery method, having a consistent set of objectives for the training, and then having somebody that can support those objectives for our training courses is very important.
Great point. I think you hit the key word right there, consistent, and that's what I was getting at with scale for sure, Gordon. That's because from your perspective, which is great. I'm taking notes myself because you have people transferring all over creation, right? So it makes total sense to me. And I know a lot of you on the phone. We have people, friends and customers from BP and Shell and Boeing, as you're hearing, on the line right now. You all have global and continental crane and rigging and hoisting standards, right? So you have a standard basically that tells your employees and your company how you're going to operate and how you're going to utilize cranes and rigging equipment and how those people are to be trained. It's probably much better for the corporation to have a scalable partner that knows that document inside and out and can deliver to that document worldwide or wherever it's pertaining to. So great feedback, Gordon. I'll jump into the reasons why here really quick, everybody. For our sake, the supporting questions you might want to know: if there are training centers, where are they located if you're going to be doing like off-site training. The other thing is how many instructors are employed. That's a concern if you have, if you're trying to do instructor-led training and you have people in Fortaleza, Brazil you need trained, as well as Denver, Colorado, and Seattle, Washington. You know, if you need that training done in 6 months, well, shoot, we only got one instructor. I don't know if we can do that. You know, so it's not ITI. I'm sorry, but as an example, that can be a concern. What are the instructors? Where are they based geographically in the same situation? Do you have instructors in Brazil and Singapore and in North America and Canada? Can your instructor teach in Canada? Can he get on the plant sites up in Fort McMurray? You know, those sorts of things are important to know. The other thing is, it's interesting as we're growing globally, we're seeing this requirement quite a bit come up, is does the curriculum meet my numbering system and language requirements? You know, there are workers worldwide in a lot of the companies we work for, and they all speak different languages, and they all have to adhere to the same standards in most cases. So does your curriculum fit? That's a big scale question, right? And then does the organization have distance learning, which also can help scale the training model as well throughout the organization? So these are all considerations and good perspectives down below. You might consider, because you should know going into it, hey, am I making a local plant level decision, or will this decision ripple throughout the organization globally? Last thing I'll say, people in Gordon's situation, he already has the authority and the direction to, hey, you're going to be making organizational-wide and helping organizational-wide training decisions. Sometimes we work with local plant managers, for instance, that don't have that authority right off the bat, but they make a good decision in hiring ITI, for instance, and before you know it, we have a North America EHS manager that we're talking to, and we're in Latin America with them and in Asia. Okay, so it can grow pretty quick, so you want to make sure if you've done a good job finding a good provider, it might scale throughout the organization. You really could be a hero in that. We've seen that happen quite a bit. It's pretty interesting. So Question 4. This is a good one. I do this as a consumer almost everywhere I go. Really, the question is, in the past, which organizations have selected the provider? I look at referrals. I look at case studies for whether it's B2B or B2C purchases that I make. Are the customers well respected? Are they in your industry? What did they say about the training, their testimonials and case studies? And the other thing is, which courses have they invested in? You know, one rule I live by in my life is, hey, everything's pretty much already been done once. Someone's gone through the problem I'm having right now, so I probably can learn something from them before I have to go experience it myself. So I am an experiential learner, but I also try and learn as much as I can through other people's successes and failures. So we really love, like Jonah said, one of the best things about working at our company is we get to work almost daily with some of the greatest organizations in the world. With that being said, I want to launch one poll question regarding that, and it basically, well, you can read it there. Which factors do you value learning about past customers? Do you like their customer list? Do you like seeing if they're in your industry, related industry? Testimonials, courses, or if you don't, do you not even care to look at who has worked with your training providers in the past? Okay, so if you can vote in there and let's see what you come up with. And these are a lot of what we're doing here, everybody, is just kind of trying to stir the pot a little bit and make sure everyone, educate everyone to some ideas you might consider when looking at training providers. So I'll leave it open here for another minute or two. And Gordon, I got some good questions for you coming up after this slide, buddy, so hang in there. Got about 50% voted. I'm going to close it here now, folks. So looks like the results are pretty even. I mean, and this is a multiple choice one, I believe, everyone. So it looks like, for the most part, half of you see value. That's not true, actually. It does say everyone that voted found some value in looking at customers. So we all kind of look at referrals or customer lists in some sense, which I think is totally healthy and good. All right. So here we go. Here's a guy rigging up a load right here, and we're going to climb the wire rope, actually. So this is the fourth question. What is my training strategy and required mix? A lot of you might totally get where I'm going here, and some of you might not. What we're trying to understand when we ask this question, we know that there's many ways to receive training to fit our organization's size, locations, availability, and as well, there's a lot of breadth and depth of course curriculum that we'd like to know about. What we feel a well-rounded provider should be able to support your organization in are pretty much, I got to say, about 3 main methods of delivery for training in a training mix. One, obviously, is at your facility. Okay, so almost every training provider you talk to should be able to provide training at your facility on your equipment and addressing your specific lifting challenges. The tougher one to address, and this is really where we have 3 fully outfitted training centers around North America, and we're currently establishing one in Rio in Brazil. The idea is, hey, where can I get some advanced skills building training? I'm going to invest in 5 people or 8 people from my company to go to a training center to get some really fine-tuned training on hands-on systems like horizontal rigging, jacking and rolling, even mobile crane operations, etc. So a few training providers might have this. ITI, we love to, I love it. I can toot our horn about it. We invest over $250,000 in each training center we have. We have multiple cranes and tons of rigging and loads and heavy equipment and all of the good stuff for people to learn on. The other part of the training mix is, can you get support on-demand e-learning, VILT, which is virtual instructor-led training, like this is webinar-based for distance learning. But it's good to have. What we found is we actually offer a lot of our course curriculum, the theoretical side obviously, as prep course or study material for a student coming to our training centers. We do that because we always believe in hands-on, no doubt, and we sell e-learning to people all the time that just want the theoretical. But in our world, cranes and rigging and lifting is a tactile skill. It's not, you can't, through telepathy, you can't make that load move, right? So it's great to learn the theory behind it. We need to know the math, but there are tactile skills that we teach, obviously, hands-on in person, okay? The fourth element what I was getting at here was you might only need let's say you only need a mobile crane operator course today, like what Gordon was talking about, but tomorrow you might need rigging gear inspection, and you might need to have a crane assembly director for those mobile cranes. You might want to have some of your safety people have accident investigation training. You know, so when you're selecting a provider, not only look at the training mix that they can offer, how to deliver it, but look at their entire portfolio of courses, no matter what type of training you're looking at, because if you like them, you probably want to continue working with them, and it would be a shame if they only had one course, right? It'd be easier to maintain a relationship if you have multiple courses to choose from. Okay, so Gordon, I'd like to hear your feedback on that. I know we do a lot of different courses for you, but I'll mention the poll question here first, and it goes back to the training delivery methods. But which learning methods do you find valuable for your organization? But go ahead, Gordon, if you have any feedback.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, what am I trying to accomplish? What type of learning, what type of subject matter depends on the type of delivery method that I'm looking for. So it's important as one of the first things that I start to do when I'm trying to decide what kind of training is that, again, I need to make sure that I have clear objectives, and I have, you've got to have, I don't care what company you are, you have to have objectives. So before you go look at any kind of training, what are your objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? Then when you get that done, then you can go out and determine, okay, now what company provides this type of training? Then, of course, you have to go through your down select process. But in some cases, the web delivery works fine, but depending on the, again, it's very important about the subject matter. Some courses you can get away, like you were talking about, Zack, with the theory. That can all be done web-based, self-paced kind of a thing. But when you start looking at a skill, then you've got to have hands-on. Because there's what, 4 or 5 different learning styles that people learn from. So that's another thing that I'm going to look at when I go research a company to determine whether or not they're going to be able to support my training needs, is how do they address the different learning styles of an individual. So those are all things that I have to take into consideration when I'm researching a company. And then the other thing is, I find that when I'm researching my companies, if I look for specific subject matter, I don't want to go to Walmart, so to speak, and get something off the shelf. I want to find a company that's focused on the specific subject matter that I'm looking for. So anyway, that's something else that I look at. Anyway.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Gordon. I want to comment on something you mentioned. And I apologize for the motion sickness I'm giving anybody. This is Prezi, by the way. It's a presentation tool. I'm flipping back and forth to GoToMeeting. It's kind of difficult to manage. But you mentioned defining the course or the requirement first. And we're going to get in. I'm going to share a document with you all later after this presentation, and it's about evaluation. But the first thing it asks, one of the first things is, what is the training requirement? And I'll point out, it's a good example. Gordon, I think, was here actually for this course. If you see in this picture here, we have a fallen crane on our site, and that was on purpose, everybody. We actually pulled over a truck-mounted Grove 50-year-old crane. It was scrapped. I mean, it was totaled basically. So to train, the course was an accident investigation. We rolled out a new accident investigation course. The pilot course was last week. We had about 15 people here for it. And what the point is, it's hard to do an accident investigation course if that's what your HSE people need at your location without any hands-on. It's difficult to go set up an accident site at Boeing, you know, at a Boeing facility. It's probably much easier to go to a training center to experience 3 actual accidents, like a fallen crane and a forklift and rigging accident, basically to do the course. So like Gordon was saying, you figure out what's the requirement, and then what's the best way for my people to learn it and get it, because it's all about skills. Remember, it's not about compliance. If it was just about compliance, hey, I'll just have, you know, Bobby come up to my office and train us up on accident investigation over 4 hours, you know, that, and get us a card on it. That wasn't what it's about. It's about building the skills. So how are they going to retain it the best? Okay, so thank you, Gordon, for that.
So, yeah, so building those skills, utilizing that scenario was very good. And so we don't tip over mobile cranes. We don't tip over forklifts at Boeing. We don't do that. What we're trying to do, and the reason that I attended that is I was trying to ensure that I had the root cause analysis skill and the capability of putting those skills to use in a scenario-based training, and it really enhanced the knowledge transfer, being able to actually go out and do that hands-on. So, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize, I didn't really explain that Boeing did not have an accident. That's not why Gordon was here. It's definitely a proactive approach to root cause analysis, and like you said, it's a great way to kind of experience a simulation in case something happens at site. But thank you, Gordon, for clearing that up. And I wish I was here. I was actually in Florida at a conference, so I missed you, but I heard it went really well. So the last couple of questions we're going to touch on as we wrap this up is regarding curriculum, instructional design, and instructors. Instructional design is a great buzzword for a lot of you, I'm sure, as a training decision-making points. The big thing we all know about, I mean, you should be asking this to all of your vendors. I don't care what they're training, but what is their instructional design? How are they formatting the training? What everyone loves the death by PowerPoint example. I had to share. I don't really like doing this in presentations, but I had to share this. Dilbert, the guy says, I could have emailed you my PowerPoint deck and you could have read it in 5 minutes, but I prefer making you sit here for an hour while I read each bullet point in slow motion. And then he says, point number 1. And Dilbert's friend there goes, I can't really see it that well, but he says, yank this as hard as you can. So we all know what death by PowerPoint is like. There's a lot of, I'm sure you all experienced fun PowerPoint presentations. And I think most learning academics have proven that PowerPoint probably addresses a half of the 4 learning styles that Gordon was mentioning. There's no interaction usually. You have to entail a lot of interaction and a lot of engagement for people to learn. Most people are experiential learners, so that means they have to do it, especially for a tactile skill. So the big question for us again, are there hands-on learning activities? How much? How much of the course is hands-on? Is it 50%? Is it 2%? You know, everyone can say, oh yeah, it's hands-on. They bring you, for a rigging class, they bring you a sling. You know, they bring the student the classroom a sling, so they show the sling in the class, and then it's hands-on training. Really identify what are your vendors going to be doing when they come there, okay? It's great to get a quote and to finalize a deal and have them show up at site for 5 days to do a class, but how are they going to deliver it? Because all that you're paying for, that 30 to 40 grand investment you're making in your employees, is about retention, right? It's about people learning and walking away with something. So The other things that you might ask are their competency assessment, how many days is it, how engaging and interactive is it, to also give you a great idea. Most companies would allow you to contact past customers to ask them those questions. You should talk to referrals. You start making, we have a lot of customers making $100,000, $200,000 training decisions with our company. You're dang well right. They're going to call our past customers and make sure that investment's going to be a good one, because they want to make sure that, hey, was there retention? Did it make a difference in your employees' everyday stuff? So the other questions we'll get into are the instructors full-time employees or contractors? I wanted to ask, I didn't mention this one to Gordon prior too, but I bring this up because, and I use an analogy here. Would you rather take a cross-country flight with an everyday veteran pilot or a retired pilot who flies once a month? Okay, we run into this a little bit, and the reason we say it is, and our salespeople, our account executives talk to customers every day. Contract labor isn't bad. It can be a lot cheaper. And so there's always ways to reduce costs through contract labor for some training companies. But we do feel there's a significant quality difference typically between trainers who are sharpened each week in instruction and their full-time industry players versus those who teach once in a while. Okay, I'm going to launch a poll question here. I want to know if you all have had any experience with contract trainers versus full-time employees. And Gordon, do you have any feedback on that? We didn't go over this question before, but.
So I think that, I can get by with, well, let's see, how do I put this? Yes, I have had experience with both. The company that's making the choice whether it's a contracted employee or a full-time employee to support your training needs to have those requirements down, and in order to make sure that you're getting what you want. If I'm gonna start a company and say, okay, I'm gonna use contract employees, then I'm going to have an instructor evaluation process in place to ensure that I'm getting that I'm making that investment for that instructor to make sure that I'm getting the quality that I require.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
kind of a difficult one for me to answer, because we use both.
Sure.
And everybody, they all serve a purpose, but we have instructor qualification requirements that we follow to ensure that that learning outcome is successful.
Yeah, I think that's probably the same feedback we're getting on the poll. I know you can't see this, Gordon, but the poll results show that 26% of people have had great results with the training company had contract trainers, and about 36% had mediocre or poor results. So if you can visualize that, it's not that it's inherently bad like I'm saying in this page, but there can be a quality difference if you're not prepared for it. And it's always the next question. We'll jump to it right now. It asks, hey, make sure you get the resumes of your instructors. If it's a contract instructor that was a 30-year Boilermaker that has been rigging his entire career, and he knows the curriculum really well, so he's been with the training company, let's say, for 5 years on contract, hey, he probably is a pretty dang good instructor. You're not going to find many more experienced than that, But if the instructor was a diesel mechanic in the Navy for 30 years, and I love the Navy and I love diesel mechanics, but he's just basically reading a PowerPoint off to the classroom, and trust me, we've heard these stories. That says something mostly about the resume and the background that you probably should have been aware of. And I'm sure, Gordon, your pre-qual instructor pre-qualification would probably have caught that, but it also could speak to the employment status at the firm that you're working with. So it's just something to bring to light. I think that was good feedback. I'm sure that there's great. We actually have we have 12 full-time instructors in North America, and that's what we utilize. So those are the guys, we invest in them a lot. So we're total believers in that. So obviously I'm coming from a biased point of view, but moving on to the resumes, this is the other question basically about the resume and about the experience, but all things being equal, let's say the guy's just as smart or the guy or gal that's training is just as smart. Do you think your lifting personnel would learn more about cranes and rigging lifting from these professionals? And Gordon, there's a picture of, a retired mechanic, HSE officer, or an academic professor on the screen versus these professionals where there's iron workers, and I think these are actually all pictures of iron workers on the screen, but the idea is, I think I should have put that in here, Gordon, having a pre-qualification for instructors is something we run into probably about, I would say at the Fortune 100 level, for our customer base. It's not at every level past that. And I think it's a great way for the people on the phone to identify who's actually going to be sending knowledge to their employees. It's a great way to filter out and understand who your vendor really is. Okay. So the three items really, again, here, everybody was instructional design, instructor status, and background. All right. So I think we're all done with poll questions. We have one more question, and this was really interesting. I'm going to ask Gordon one more question to highlight this, but the question is, you should ask the vendor, what educational support staff and technology does the provider offer? This is a very, very person-intensive business, the training companies to a training department. There's a lot of support staff involved, and so you want to ask yourself, first of all, how important is customer service to me? And then also, is it if it is a qualification or a criteria for me, what does the vendor have? So do I have a dedicated account executive that understands my organization's needs, or is there just kind of one person taking training orders from 500 customers a day? Technology-wise, is there an accessible student database for my employees online? These are all questions that might be relevant to you and might not be. The other things might be up to date on regulations. Is the company up to date on regulations, and can I get stuff? If I'm a construction company going to work in Ohio, and the next month I'm going to be working in Michigan, can I get the updated state regulations from you? Can you support me in that manner? And the last thing I really want to touch on here is the technical director of the company. Every training company should have a brain in charge that knows the industry of what you're training. It's just like a dean. You got the dean of Harvard Business School. The guy or gal should be a pretty solid business person and academic as well as a business professional. So that's all vital. One thing, Gordon, I'd like to turn it over to you for a last comment on that, but you mentioned earlier that customer service was actually really, I think you actually already mentioned on the call, but do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, customer service is very important to me because things in my environment, things, you would think that they would be pretty stable, but a lot of, I get urgent requests from customers all across the U.S., and I need to have somebody, and I've utilized your company, Zack, to support some of those activities, urgent activities. Let's say that I need emergent crane training down in Florida, as an example. I call you guys, you set it up, and we're off and running. And I don't have to go back, and once I get ITI on board with my request, then I don't have to go back and babysit it. I'm able to say, okay, this is what I need, this is where I need it, this is the contact, and the customer support that I'm getting so far is top notch, because I don't have to babysit that activity. That allows me to move on to my next task. So
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you. Awesome. Huge. I know I work. One of the things I mentioned or that was on the slide there on my bio was I work with we call them our training solutions experts here. That's our account executive team, and we call them that because they literally, we want to advertise, hey, we're getting calls daily to figure out the training solution right for you, and we have a good training program here internally to get them to expert status within 2 years. And that is so that they can literally, at the drop of a hat, hey, Boeing needs training in Florida. How do we deliver it? Which instructor are we going to use? Is it going to be at our training facility, or is it going to be on site? All of those items are necessary, as well as what's the training mix and all those questions. So it's definitely about customer service. And the other thing I was going to mention is our TRASOs, we call them training solutions experts. They have a lot of difficulty getting a hold of a lot of our customers all the time, because people like Gordon, I mean, you all are making training decisions and corporate decisions at a lot of levels, and you're very, very busy, and it's good to have somebody that you can outsource some stuff to, and to make sure it doesn't have to be babysat, like Gordon was saying. So I just want to mention this in conclusion. Gordon, thank you so much, my friend. It was just awesome. Everyone I asked Gordon, basically, actually Valerie, I think, emailed Gordon a month ago, and then we just connected on the phone today for him to hop on his cell phone and get on this call. So it was great to have you. I hope that the insight provided benefited. I know it benefited a lot of people. One thing that before I want to give Gordon last word after I mention this, the cost of training worksheet. We have this document available. I'm going to actually go to it right now on my computer, and it'll be available for you to download at any point, as well as all of the webinar resources. But we wanted to make this for everyone that attended this webinar, just so you can have a working document maybe to help evaluate training requirements. So like I said earlier, you can identify the training requirement, kind of identify if it's compliance or competency based, and you're just going through the decision-making matrix here. It'll give you ability to evaluate your internal cost investment. So you have a full number down here, and we'll also put this in Excel. Likely that this will program all the information for you. But you'll understand, hey, what is this training going to cost me internally? And then I've gotten, let's say, 4 quotes. Here are the price quotes I've received. And then, so that's your external cost. But then we also give you an evaluation matrix here for vendor quality scores. And if you actually, we'll flip to the back page really quick. Those would be things that are important to you. So you can customize this document or prioritize them, these items here, and add to them. But the items include regional support level, like we talked about. Was it local, plant level, or is it continental, global? Customer list, how's the customer list? What's the training mix look like, et cetera. The other criteria that are important to you, okay? And the last table here is a total cost investment analysis. So it gives you, hey, what's the total cost of the training I'm going to be going through or have my people go through, and what is the percentage of internal costs versus total cost, and then external cost versus total cost. Like we mentioned, this number should usually be between 75 and 90%, okay, of the overall cost. So it's good information to know. It'll be on our website for download. And Gordon, I want to turn over to you just for the last word. And I really, again, man, thank you so much for joining, and thank you all for joining us today. Actually, forgive me, I want to give it over to you, but we're going to have a QA session. Jonah's reminding me, because we have plenty of questions that came in. But Gordon, go ahead.
Okay, so first off, I'm dropping into an area where I may end up losing service, but again, I think if I was going to provide any type of ongoing thought for those on the line, I would say that when you go to look for training, make sure that you have your expectations clearly defined so you know what you expect so you can get the outcome that you want. That's very important and could save you a lot of money.
Great, yeah, great feedback. Thank you, Gordon. I think that's part of it. A lot of times we'll just get an email, hey, I need a quote for training on this, and we kind of know that the person that sent it probably hasn't ordered a lot of training before, and when you get the RFP, for instance, that is 10 pages long, not that we enjoy those, but it has explicitly spelled out requirements, because they know exactly what they want. That's really the sign of a good training purchaser. Like you're saying, you have to be prepared and understand what you want. So, Gordon, if you're still able, we do have a question regarding the four methods of learning, like you mentioned. And I don't know if you recall all four of them. I could look them up here in a second, but I don't know if that's. I'm sure there's been dissertations written about them, but do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, and I would have to go back and look them up. I know that they're there, and I think that if you can pull them up online, and I can tell you from personal experience that up until 10 years ago, I did not know anything at all about them, but I ended up as we get to that grandparent age, I started raising grandkids, and then I realized that I was having trouble with some, and I realized, wait a minute, these learning I started utilizing that same concept with two of my grandkids, and it's made a significant difference in them as young adults now.
Yeah. So, I believe it.
They're real.
Yeah, absolutely. We have refined, as a corporate training company, we've refined our instructional design, just like you're saying with your grandkids, multiple times. Like, we're always refining it to make sure that students are retaining and growing as people. Like I mentioned, there's probably several dissertations on this. This is not I did not get a degree in education or anything like that, but I would say that it's probably not an exact science for how the brain works, but Jonah and I both have found two websites. He is on his laptop, and I'm on a computer. You guys can see there's one that says there's 7 learning styles, there's one that says there's 4, but they, like what you were talking about, is a lot of them are tactile or hands-on, physical, it's kinesthetic, there's spatial and visual, verbal, obviously, and which is through hearing, and auditory, which is a separate one. So it's a great question. I think it's what you have to do in the people we're often training and you're probably looking after are, we're in heavy industry, right? So they might be tradespeople. You have to, I think you got to evaluate, Gordon, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably evaluate who you're getting trained, and it'd be good to understand, hey, what are their learning styles? And in heavy industry, a lot of it is a tactile trade, and these people work with their hands every day. That's exactly how they like to learn as well, is what we've found, right? So, but you have to couple it with multiple other delivery models for good retention. So we had another question come in. Are there any tower crane rescue courses in case of a catastrophic event? That's a great question. I haven't heard of one exactly like that. It's a good idea. There are at-heights rescue training courses, and I think, Kevin, you asked that question. At-heights rescue training is a great idea, I think, of what you're talking about. For whether it's a tower crane, a wind turbine, up on the cell, the tower, or even an oil rig, you name it. Anything at-heights rescue. We have a great partner that does that. Mallory Company is a safety supply house. They own ENSA, E-N-S-A, and they provide at-heights rescue training. So we send a lot of folks to them when it comes to that. We don't specialize in that training. So great question, Kevin. So It looks like there's no other questions that came in. If you would, if you want to type any more in right now, we'll stick around. But otherwise, Gordon, again, thank you so much. We might have lost him, everybody, but I appreciate you coming and listening in. And we'll have all these resources available for you on the website. So have a great working week, and we'll talk to you later, okay?